Okay, well, welcome officially. And as we move through the morning, if you need to step out and get more food or coffee, feel free to do that. A couple of house cleaning items. If you do have your cell phone with you and it's not on silent or vibrate or something, if you can do us the favor of making sure it is turned off so there's no audible tones going off, that would be great. Restrooms, for those of you who aren't familiar with this floor, is out the door, and it's the first hallway to the left. So if you do need restrooms, they're very, very close. Well, before we get into the formal lesson, I want to explore one piece with you because it's a common theme in my experience of helping people move into leadership. For those of you who are here today, and maybe you've come from a different church, or even you maybe have done some things here at Shadow Mountain, just by showing of hands, how many here have done some kind of leading at some point? Okay. So at some level, you've experienced the leadership dynamic. Here's the one thing, and it seems to be fairly common. It was common in my own experience when I was moving into more of a leadership role in my work, and a lot of people that I've talked to have said it's a scary idea of doing something in the way of leadership. Has anybody ever felt fear when you think about leading? By show of hands? Okay, good amount of us. Okay. Well, I want to make sure you know that that's normal. And as you're exploring what God may be doing in your heart, I want you to know that fear almost always precedes something new God wants to do in your life. And so today, I want to sort of begin to clear that fog of fear, because if you're like me, sometimes I can get so caught up in an emotion like fear, and I can sit in a room like this, and I can get great information, and it just all kind of bounces off. It's like I'm Teflon, because I'm so worked up and so anxious. So today, I just want to encourage you that if you're feeling those feelings at the idea of doing something new in the way of leadership, it's absolutely normal. You're among good friends and you're in good company if you're feeling those feelings. And to give you a little bit more in the way of encouragement, we have a short video we're going to play that Pastor Jeremiah recorded for us. So we'll watch that and then we'll move on.
Hello, future leaders of Shadow Mountain Community Church. We are excited to share our leadership practices with you today. God is doing some amazing things here at Shadow Mountain. Raising up new leaders for ministry is one of them. You may not realize it, but we have over 300 small groups that meet all over San Diego County, serving nearly 3,000 people every week. And facilitating every one of those small groups is a small group leader. A small group leader provides the all-important environment where people feel safe enough to talk about their lives, the successes and victories, as well as the hardships and difficulties. So today we are inviting you to become a small group leader. What does committing to this ministry mean? Well, first of all, it means that you will have the opportunity to grow in your faith by stepping out and starting something new. It also means that you will help others step out in faith as well, as they come to your group and experience life change and growth in their walk with Christ. You can do this. I know that you can, because God is in this, and anything God does always succeeds.
So let me do a quick definition of kind of how we do small groups here. And the reason I want to do that is because we may have a different definition in our minds. And we have small groups that meet off campus throughout San Diego County. We have small groups that meet at some of the different campuses throughout the county. We actually have online small groups now. We have a community led by Rod Gray right over here, where they actually do small groups through video chat, and they're all across the country, the different people that come to the small group there. We have small groups on this campus. If you've been involved in either the men's ministry, the women's ministry, the Young Married Cafe, Young Adult Cafe, just to name a few, those are all small group ministries that we have. But one of our mandates is to have people who are developed in a leadership dynamic, and that's why we're having this today, is for you to begin to explore how that might look for you. You may have come here this morning, I don't know, and you may be thinking, well, I don't know that I want to be a small group leader, and that's fine. A lot of what we're going to explore today can go into other areas of ministry. We have some people who help out with military ministry. We have some people who do the evangelism ministry. And those are also some things that we're going to teach today that will help in that arena as well. But the big piece that we want to make sure you walk away with today is a lot of clarity. First of all, about how we do leadership here at Shadow Mountain. And then secondly, what your next step may be. So I want you to take a look at the card that we had on top of the folder. It says Leadership Essentials. And you'll see at the bottom there, after you fill out your contact information, this is just our way to follow up after the event, so you can be thinking about this today. I am interested in serving as a group leader in the following ministry. And we list out small groups, women's ministry, men's ministry, Young Married Cafe, Young Adult Cafe, or other. When we get done today, I'm going to ask you to fill this out and just leave it at your table. This will help us know where you're planning to go next. And it will help us then get in touch with the appropriate ministry leader to help them guide you and help you into your next steps involving in that ministry. Okay, so we have this personality profile, the Litauer. How many people have completed it by show of hands? We got them all done? Pretty close, pretty close. So if you're still finishing it, it's okay. Keep working on it. But let's turn to page 2. And I just want to do a little definition on this. The reason we do this first is because as you're working through the different material this morning, I'm going to draw attention to the fact that different people respond differently to some of these different leadership traits. So you'll see that there's 4 boxes there on page 2. Understanding your personality style. So there's the sanguine, which is called the popular or the talker. There's the choleric, which is the powerful or the worker. There's the phlegmatic, which is the peaceful or the listener. And there's the melancholy, which is the perfect or the thinker. So by show of hands right now, how many people, I'm not saying that you agree with what this profile is telling you. I just want to see what you landed on. So how many people here landed as a sanguine by show of hands? Okay. Okay. And then how many as a choleric by show of hands? Got a few cholerics in here this morning. Okay. Phlegmatic. Phlegmatic. Okay. And then lastly, melancholy. Okay. All right. So you may be sitting there thinking, I don't know if that's the right one, and that's okay. The idea is we want you to begin to think about how do you show up as a leader, because a phlegmatic shows up a lot different than a choleric. And this is something that's been around for years. You may have taken some personality profiles that you have become familiar with. We like using this one just because it's simple, quite easily accessible. But let's go through a little bit of the different definitions of the different personality styles. So the sanguine, we'll start there. Their basic desire is to have fun. You may know some sanguines in your life. And if you're a phlegmatic or a melancholy, you may be like, they just have too much fun. They need to calm down. Emotional needs, they want approval and attention. Now, I put depression in here because we get sad sometimes. We feel less than ourselves, and so we use the word depression. Their cause of depression is isolation. They're deprived of connection and attention. You got to be around people if you're a sanguine. In fact, people give you energy. Now, if you're more of a phlegmatic or melancholy, you may find that people actually take away your energy. Right? And that goes to the introvert-extrovert dynamic that some of us have in our lives. But it's just good to know that. And we like to kind of do this for fun. President's personality, Ronald Reagan he was sanguine. And if you guys remember, he was always just having a good time. Always smiling, always happy to be the president, always happy to be the president of the country he was the president of. Here's what's good, a mature state, an ability to listen well and exercise discipline. This is where you start to think about yourself as a leader. If you're a sanguine, you may not have thought that part through yet, or you may be struggling with that piece. Like, sometimes I've been told that I don't listen real well, or I cut people off. And I've got things I want to do. I've got a list of things I really want to accomplish, and I never get to it. And so that's a part of the maturing process for you. And then if you had a sanguine in a group, say you're leading a Bible study or a small group, developing them, be highly relational to a sanguine. Don't box them in and practice spontaneity. So if you're more organized and structured and you're the leader of a group and you see somebody in your group who's a sanguine, they can become very frustrating to you if you don't understand them. And you may have had that experience if you are, say, a phlegmatic or melancholy. So these are some things to begin to think through in the leadership dynamic. How do I show up? And because of that, how do I respond to those people that may show up in a group that I'm a part of? Secondly, let's look at the cholerics, the powerful or the worker. They want to get things done, and their basic desire is to have control. So that's one of those things that's always interesting. In another leadership training we're going to talk about at the end of the class today, we talk a lot about if you as a leader don't have a plan, if you don't show up and kind of act like you know what you're doing, even if you don't feel super confident yet, lots of times if you have a choleric in your group, they will nervously begin to take charge. Have you ever seen anybody do that? I've seen somebody do that. There's something about the control piece that cholerics really, they need to know either somebody is in control, and if not, they're going to have to take control. And I've seen that happen. I have not always been a pastor, and in the work world, I've seen that happen a lot, where somebody clearly was qualified to lead a project or an initiative, but they weren't super intense in the way they led, and they were always being kind of pushed around. And they didn't understand some of these dynamics, and so it was very hard for them as they managed that group of people. Cause of depression, emotional needs, appreciation and achievement. They want to take the next hill. They want to know that they've got an award or something where people have said, good job, and they've got that. Is that the choleric table back there? They're all saying, you're awesome, you're great, good job. You're eating that strawberry so well, and you're drinking that coffee amazing. Keep drinking that coffee, yeah. Cause of depression, no challenge or control. Cholerics need to be fighting something. They need to know there's something they can push against. They want to prove their strength, and that's part of how cholerics show up. President's personality was Nixon. Some of you guys may not actually remember Nixon, but I may have to update this. I don't know. But yeah, Nixon was in charge to a fault. Mature state, sensitive, gentle, inclusive, and compassionate. That can be very, very hard for clerics because they always want to be moving forward. And these type of expressions, being sensitive or gentle, feels like slowing down. And they want to stay in the top gear. And if they slow down, they feel like they're not moving forward, which means they're not accomplishing. And so you as a leader, if you're not a choleric, if a choleric shows up, this is a great way to understand them. Like, okay, I don't have to take what they're saying personally. They're actually struggling right now because they don't know how to be sensitive in this moment, or they don't know how to be gentle, and so they're kind of being abrupt. And I'm going to be able to allow that, but I'm also going to guide that. And so you can understand both sides of that equation. Now here's something interesting. We put in this little box below those two because those two sort of run in one section together, and the other two go in a different section. But the reaction to abuse. Abuse is a strong word, but we just want to make sure. We get abused in life. We may not always understand it. We get treated bad. We get harsh treatment. And so we use that strong word to sort of highlight this. Their reaction to abuse, they feel guilty, overachieving, denial, compulsions, or they become a workaholic. You may know somebody, either in your life or through observation, who is either a sanguine or a choleric, and it's like they never slow down. And there may be, and I'm not saying you have to understand this or be able to get to it, but there may be something in their life that they haven't sorted out yet. Well, the beauty of the body of Christ is we don't have to fix that. We just have to accept it. And so sometimes we'll get people in our group and it just feels a little, they just don't feel, they feel like they're still doing something and they're working through something. And I as leader don't completely understand that. This is a way for us to pray for them and also a way for us just to allow them to go through the struggle of maturing under our leadership. Now we go to phlegmatic, peaceful or listener. The basic desire here is to have peace. They don't like conflict. So that's the challenge. See, think about it. If you're a phlegmatic leader and you have a choleric in your group and you need to help them back off, that can be very discomforting, right? And so this is a part of the normalizing of that reality. Their emotional needs, respect and worth for who they are, not necessarily for what they do. Cholerics like to be known for what they do, but a phlegmatic wants to be known for who they are, their person, their character. Cause of depression, conflict, and confrontation. I have some friends, and they just won't confront. They will not do it. And there may be some of you in here who are like, I'm in that club, whatever that club is, the non-confrontational club. But the challenge is now, they're my age, they're in their late 40s, and they've got kids, and they need to be parents at a level that they're not comfortable being. And what's happening is they're wrestling with, do I stay the parent I want to be, or do I become the parent I need to be for my kids? And so that can be a real challenging area for phlegmatics. President's personalities was Ford. Again, some of you may not remember President Ford, but mature state, ability to confront and speak their opinion. I'm very close with a few phlegmatics, and it has been a major courage journey for them to move from sitting there and having all these thoughts and feelings going on and not verbalizing them to actually saying, I don't like that. I have some friends, and we go out to dinner, and they won't tell us if they don't like the restaurant we're going to go to. Before we go, we're like, hey, where you guys want to go? And everybody says, I want to go to, say, Sammy's Wood-Fired Pizza. And they're in their heads like, I hate Sammy's, but they won't say it. And so watching them wrestle through that, that's a part of their growth process. Developing them is to ask permission to lead them. Are you willing to do hard things? Because they can be passive and aggressive. So again, understanding both yourself, if you are this phlegmatic personality, or understanding those that may show up. Like, for instance, let's just pick on the cholerics again, because they have a big power anchor over there. That's going to be a challenge, right, cholerics? It's going to be a challenge to begin to slow that down and nurture, because you're not natural nurturers. But in a leadership dynamic, you have to lead every personality style that you have. And so knowing that and becoming comfortable with that is so, so important. Lastly, melancholies, the perfect or the thinker. Their basic desire is to have perfection. Who are perfectionists in here by... Okay, they're like, I don't want to... There's cholerics over there. They're going to shoot me down. Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's hard. It's hard being perfectionists in an imperfect world, isn't it? Yeah, that's a very difficult thing. And I watch perfectionists struggle. And that's okay to struggle. But it's also okay to do your best and then allow the journey to continue, whatever that might mean. And so in a group dynamic, that means sometimes you do your work to the best of your ability, and then you release it into the group, whatever that group might look like. Their emotional needs, order and understanding. Order and understanding. I have a very close friend, and she actually lives in the house with me, and I woke up next to her this morning, and she has to have order, and I'm always losing things because she's putting them away. And it's a little bit of a joke in our house. I come home last night, where are my shoes? Where are my shoes? I left them right there 10 minutes ago, and she's put them somewhere else. And we were having a fun conversation about that last night. But so you may have people like that in your life. They're always putting things away, even though you need them out. Yeah, that was a fun conversation. So their cause of depression, imperfection, chaos, and insensitive people. One of the things I've learned about melancholies is you can walk into a beautiful setting like this morning, but your eyes will immediately go to the imperfections in the room. I don't know if that's you, right? You can have this beautiful spread, great food, but you might, oh look, some of the coffee spilled on that white linen over there. Oh no, what do we do about that? That's out of order, right? Or you might notice the trash can's getting a little full. Oh no, what's going to happen if the trash isn't emptied in time? Is it going to explode? I don't know. And so just getting comfortable with that, and getting comfortable if you're not melancholy, to allow them to struggle and wrestle with that, and just let them have their struggle with perfection. But the beauty of this is that we begin to understand better us and them. But let's move on. President's personalities, Carter and Lincoln. Mature state, joy, accepts less than ideal. I've actually talked to melancholies who have said, I don't know joy. I don't do that. And that's sad, because it's one of the top fruits of the Spirit. There's love, then joy. And so a part of the growing process for melancholy is to step out and practice new ways of doing life, even if it doesn't feel just right. A few years ago, we were starting some new initiatives here at Shadow Mountain, and Pastor Jeremiah, I would not qualify him as a perfectionist, but he came up with a great saying. He said, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. Do you guys remember him preaching that? He used it in some sermons. But that's one of the ways a melancholy can begin to wrestle through. If it's worth doing, I may have to check my perfection at the door for now. Maybe I can come along later and put some order to this chaos. But if you read anything God ever does, most of the time it starts chaotic. Later on, order comes in. I'm thinking right now of just Acts, the first couple of chapters of Acts. The apostles are freaked out, scared, hiding, and then tongues come into the room. If I was a perfectionist, that would be out of order. Just floating tongues of fire. Oh, look, there's a tongue floating in the air randomly. That would be scary. That would be weird. But then this explosion of the church happened because of the Holy Spirit coming into those people's lives. Amazing things were going on. But if you read some of the letters, especially Corinthians, there's a lot of weirdness and chaos going on in that church. That's why the Corinthians was written. It's like, you guys are crazy. Dial it back. Right? And so after chaos sometimes comes order. So be of good cheer if you struggle with that part. Mature, okay, got that. Developing them, connect emotionally, relationally, clear assignments and goals, and listen actively. And then lastly, we have, again, this reaction to abuse, trauma, hardship. Guilt. Isn't it interesting, the reaction on both the cholerics and the sanguines and the phlegmatic and melancholies is guilt. But then we go from overachieving up above, now down here to the phlegmatic and melancholy, to underachieving. It's like, it's futile. What's the point? Why even try? I'm not even going to do this anymore. I'm done. It can be depression, withdrawal, and low self-worth. So as you, again, think through this, and as we reflect a little bit more today on this, I hope that this becomes a window into you and into people, not a reason to sort of feel guilty or bad, or I haven't gotten far enough yet. I want this to be just illuminating so that you can begin to think about yourself as a leader, leading people of different personalities than yourself. Now, when you turn to page 3, that's not something we're going to dive into today. This is for you just to begin to say, now how do I show up at a deeper level? So I want you guys to have that sort of as a homework assignment for later on. But that's great because this gives you even finer details of how you might lead. Yeah?
What happens if somebody falls like within 2 points of all of them?
Well, that happens. There's a lot of people who have sort of a major and a minor in a personality.
It's like I'm 2 9s, a 10, and an 11.
Yeah.
Everything is like
Yeah.
there.
And this, hopefully you're not thinking I have to stay within one of the boxes. But what happens, and a lot of that depends on how you face different things. So for instance, a phlegmatic may have, like if they're having a good time, they may show up, or a person may show up as a phlegmatic, say, if they're having a good time. But if they're having a challenge, they may go choleric.
It's like I have lots of negatives in one and lots of positives
Yeah.
in one. And it's like,
Yeah. So just know, again, we're not going to go comprehensive on this. It's more of an awareness piece. But what you can do now is you can begin to pay attention to yourself. So for instance, let's talk resources, which we will talk about more in the lesson. But if you're low resource, let's say you're hungry, you haven't had a good amount of food. If you're tired and you're needing food or a nap or something, you may notice your personality begins to morph a little bit away from what you normally show up as, right? I know for me, I'm a little bit more, I can actually go a little bit angry and a little bit grumpy if I get hungry. Not everybody does. I know some people who get really high energy and kind of cuckoo, right? That's just how they show up when they get hungry. And my daughter does that. She actually gets a lot of energy, and she's 5. And she's running around the house crazy, and we're like, oh, she hasn't had food. She's hungry. She doesn't crash. But that changes her mood and her mode of being able to show up in our family well. And so likewise for you, you may notice you swing a little bit as your resources go lower, and maybe you swing back when your resources are higher. But yeah, just start playing with this. And there's all kinds of personality options online. You can go to Google and type in personality profile and tons of stuff if you want to explore this more. But for today, just know you're probably going to show up as a leader a very specific way. And now it's a matter of, okay, then how will I then show up with other personality styles? Okay, in your folder, let's turn there. On the right side, you have a little small group leadership packet which you can pull out, and the leadership practices sheet you can pull out. And this is going to be our main content for the day. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a sort of a theology on community, because if you're leading people, you're a community. And so we want to make sure we understand that. And then we're going to work into some kind of parts and pieces of how you could do something in the way of leading a group. So first of all, how community works. You are most complete. You are most complete when you do life in community. You guys see that there at the top of the leadership practices? Good. And we do have it also on PowerPoint if you need. You are most complete when you do life in community. You guys remember last week, if you were here for the weekend services, he talked about it's not good for man to be alone. And he said it's not just about a man being alone, it's about people being alone, and how there's something about community that's so needed. And that's what we're talking about here, and there's a few scriptures that back that up. Then we go to outside of community and relationship. We're left with hurting hearts and distorted thinking. So here's what I want to give you as we're working through these 3 pieces. The first step, you're most complete. That's God's initial first stop. He wants you to be complete. But it happens in community. He designed it that way. He didn't design you to be you doing life all by yourself. And so he says, hey, here's my blueprint. You will be most alive. You'll be most aware. You'll be most focused. You'll feel the most joy and fulfillment if you're in community. But if you're not, you're going to start to notice hurting hearts and distorted thinking. Now, 2 things I want you to think about this. One, some people may show up to a group you lead with that, hurting hearts, distorted thinking. And let me give you an example from the Bible about how this can happen. John the Baptist, we all know who John the Baptist is, cousin to Jesus, which means they probably hung out as kids. He was the preparer of Jesus to show up and start his ministry. He baptized Jesus. The Holy Spirit came out of the sky in the form of a dove. He heard God speak regarding Jesus at that baptism. And then they kind of went separate ways. John was still doing his baptisms and his ministry, and then Jesus started doing his ministry. But they stayed in touch. But then Herod got himself in trouble, and he got put in jail. And you don't know how much time, scholars differ on this, but he was in there long enough that he began to feel lonely. And as you read in the scriptures, and we have the scriptures down here, he actually sent word to Jesus to say, hey, are you the one? Are you the one that was supposed to come? Or should we expect another? And in that question, we're seeing both a hurting heart and a distorted thinking. I mean, imagine if you knew from childhood that you were going to be the person that was going to prepare the way for the Messiah, for Jesus Christ. And you're doing it. And you're doing an amazing job at it. And then one day you get put in jail, and all of a sudden you're isolated. Your brain just goes to different places. And you start to feel isolated, and you start to feel lonely, and you start to feel forgotten. And so even the guy who baptized Jesus Christ struggled with this idea of a hurting heart and distorted thinking. So if he did it, chances are you've all done it, I've done it, and chances are people who may come to a group are going to be at that place. And one of the things a lot of our leaders talk about is, what do I do with somebody who their theology is a little off? And I think the flinch is to correct them, right? We want to make sure they get the right theology. But I want to warn you, because as we've learned about these different personality styles, if you take a sledgehammer to somebody and they need a screwdriver, what could that do to their walk with God? It could slow it down. It could derail it. It could confuse it. You may have had an experience like that where a well-meaning person thought it was more important to correct you than to walk with you in your journey and to allow you to struggle. And you may have had a time when you either walked away from a certain part of the church, or maybe you've walked away from the church for a while. People do that. And I want you to hear from me today, your job's not to correct people as a leader in the dynamic that we're asking you to do here. We have a disciplinary hierarchy built into Shadow Mountain if we need to deal with that. Many times people who have a wrong approach to theology or their understanding of the Bible, they're not doing it to make life hard for you. They're actually trying to figure it out. And that's maybe all they know. And so as you encounter people with hurting hearts and distorted thinking, I want you to be of good courage to know you don't have to change their hearts. You don't have to change their thinking. You need to allow them to wrestle through that. Safety trumps that. Safety trumps your need to fix or change people. And then lastly, by default, we drift from each other. We drift from each other. And so you'll see there's this kind of process. If you're not most complete, if you're beginning to move away from community, and if you're beginning to live life outside of a community dynamic, your view of the world's going to begin to change. And it's going to change away from your best and away from God's design for you. And that's that hurting heart and distorted thinking. But if you have those long enough in your life, you're just going to start to pull away from community and from people in general. And you may have had a journey of that at some point in time in your life. You may have been alone for a while and then you found community. Well, the good news is this. One, we're giving you today sort of the blueprint of how to do community well. And also, it works every time because it's God's plan. I'm just the guy that put it on a piece of paper and we have it on PowerPoint now, but God designed this from the beginning. And it's not difficult. It's actually very simple. At times it may not feel easy, but you can do this. So as a counter to this, someplace, and this isn't in PowerPoint, but someplace in the white space there, I want to give you the counter to those three pieces, okay? What is it that people need in community so that they can grow? Well, the first thing they need is safety. Safety. Jesus was a master at this. People need safety. They need to know that their imperfections will not be used against them. That they're accepted just as they are right now, but there's a growth track that they can get on. So safety. The second thing is they need to be reconnected, or they need connection. So they need safety and then they need connection. And then third, they need to be around biblical truth. They need to be learning from the Bible, biblical truth. So the three things are safety, connection, and biblical truth. That's the recipe that we build into our small groups, whether it's in the men's ministry, women's ministry, at one of our campuses. Those three pieces begin to bring people away from isolation and back into a group of people. It begins to heal their hearts and fix their thinking, and then it brings them back to a more complete experience of life. Safety, connection, and then biblical truth. So that's it. Hopefully you can take a kind of a deep sigh. Oh, okay, good. I don't have to wrestle these people to the ground and convince them of things they're not ready to hear and all that. So that's how community works. So how can you, as a leader, whether you're a choleric or a phlegmatic or a melancholy or a, what's that one? I always get that one. Sanguine. That's a weird word to me. It's hard for me to, I'm not even sure what the root of these words are, but they're very different words. But how do you do this? How can you create safety? How can you get people connected while you're focusing on biblical truth? That's this box here, this empathy box. Empathy. Has anybody, I'm guessing most of you have heard the word by show of hands. Have you heard the word empathy or, yeah, okay. Here's the thing about empathy, it's different than sympathy. So pop quiz time. Anybody want to be brave and say, what's the difference between sympathy and empathy? Yeah.
Well, sympathy is just a nice little letter,
Okay.
You're really not doing anything about it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Kind of not action behind. Okay. All right. Who else wants to try? Yeah.
With sympathy, you understand how somebody else's stuff is going on. With empathy, you actually take on the feelings with them.
Yeah. There's almost like an experience that you're experiencing something that they're experiencing. So let's look at this. Let's look at this definition. The working definition: recognizing and responding to the emotions of others. Recognizing and responding to the emotions of others. And then there's a couple definers here. The ability to enter into another person's experience and connect with them in a way that you actually experience to some degree what they're experiencing, just kind of like what we heard. Then you've got the skill to understand where others are coming from and appropriately respond to their needs. And 3, empathy is achieved by putting yourself in someone else's shoes or by sharing your feelings regarding their situation. And then we have a little equation here. Empathy plus willingness equals leadership. Empathy plus willingness equals leadership. So let's take just a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, and I want you to talk about a time, briefly, when you have either experienced empathy given to you or when you have been able to give empathy and that person was able to experience that empathy you offered. So how have you either experienced empathy given, or when have you been able to offer it and you could tell it was received well? So let's take 2 or 3 minutes at the tables and then we'll come back. So go ahead. Okay. So hopefully you've gotten a little closer to this thing about empathy. I don't know about you. Some of you, maybe it's a very easy thing to be empathic, I think is what they call the person who empathizes. But it's not natural for me. It's a learned skill. I'm a little bit, I want to help people, but I kind of want to help them my way, in my time, at my speed. And so I've had to learn, it's God's job. I can create an environment that's safety, relationship, and biblical truth. So some of you may just right now even be noticing your thoughts are beginning to shift a little bit toward this idea of empathy. Because if we equate growth with accomplishment or milestones or something that we can make happen, empathy feels very weak. It doesn't feel like we're in control. If somebody is showing us empathy and we've never experienced that, it can feel very strange. Especially, remember, all 4 personality styles go to guilt if they've had negative experiences. And the idea of community is to bring them into an experience of life that's most complete. Well, if you begin to offer them empathy, they may get uncomfortable with what you're offering them because they've only known get it done, keep going, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And we're saying, no, we'll do this together. It's countercultural. And so you may be noticing in your own experience. I've had that experience of either giving or receiving empathy. But now you may be noticing, but I don't know that I felt comfortable doing it, giving it, or I may not have felt comfortable receiving it. It was good, but I may not have felt super comfortable. And that goes to your experience of safety. What does safety look like to you, and what does safety in community look like? The truth is, we've all had community experiences that have been unsafe. Anybody want to testify? It happens. And it's not always coming from people who are evil or looking to hurt you. My parents, they're God-fearing people. My dad was a pastor. And I grew up, and they hurt me at times. They said things that didn't make me feel great. And I can dial back if I want to and remember those things. And they weren't trying to harm me, but they're broken. And they didn't have this great class. See? They need to come out here and come to this great class. But they didn't have the experience and knowledge at the time that they needed to exercise empathy well. And so you may have had that experience where somebody who was well-meaning, but yet maybe inexperienced or inequipped. That's why we're having this class, is so that you can be both well-meaning and well-equipped to help people move forward, right? So empathy is a big piece. If you don't have empathy, you can almost never have safety because people are struggling day in and day out. Just driving here, you could have had challenges. There are crazy people on the roads, just absolutely crazy people on the roads. And that can really get you anxious driving here, right? And that in and of itself can do something to us. But here's what they've shown over in the psychology world, which actually echoes a lot of what the Bible teaches, because I think that's where they're getting it, but they just don't want to admit it. But there's this thing they call stacking in psychology. Anybody heard stacking? All right, so stacking is when you have a kind of a bad situation happen and you aren't given empathy and able to kind of process that. And then you have another bad thing happen. Then you have another bad thing happen. And another bad thing happen. And then something that's not that big of a deal happens and you explode. You ever observe that, or have you ever done that? I've done it. Yeah. That's called stacking. What's happening is you're responding to all those different parts and pieces of negative experience. And what small group is designed to do is to help you process out those different experiences so that you respond appropriately when things go bad. My daughter last night was very hungry, and she and mom had not been getting along great because she was being very naughty little 5-year-old. And I wish I had the video. It was my wife and I were absolutely fighting to not laugh. But we could tell she's tired. She should have had a nap and she didn't get one. She's extremely hungry, and she had kind of a rough day at school. And it looked like she was swimming in the water. Her body was just gesticulating, throwing a fit. Just, remember those dancers that used to do this with their bodies? She was kind of doing that on the floor, right? She was so upset. And what had happened was her day had stacked up against her. And she's not learned yet how could she? She's 5. But we're watching this like, oh my gosh, she got so stacked today. This is crazy. And so we had to just hold her and let her cry it out. That's empathy, holding her, crying it out. But my flinch is to stop, quit yelling, stop screaming. I'll give you something to cry about, right? And so I have to work really hard to allow her just to process out that frustration. And here's the beauty, and you've probably experienced this as a parent. You let them do it, and then they're like this gem. They're back. The kid that you were so happy you had years and years ago, they're back. Maybe they're only back for a few minutes, but they're back. And that's what empathy does to adults. It gets them sane. It allows their internal world to settle down enough that they can just be themselves for a few minutes and respond. And so imagine in a Bible study or some kind of a study that you're doing in a group, if somebody's not given empathy, they're not receiving the good information that's being offered to them. They're just all stacked up and frustrated. And so many times we just allow them to say, I'm having a horrible day. And that may be all they have to say. Now I'm ready. I'm having a horrible day, and now I'm ready. Hey, let's do this. Let's take 3 minutes or so. If you need to go to the restroom, let's take a break. And if not, go get some more coffee, go get some more food. But we'll say 3 minutes. I'll start back. You guys can hustle back as you need.
Just so you know, we also have some car keys that we found. We're at the light table, the check-in table over here. If you're missing your car keys, come take a look and see if you're in the
I try to be empathetic with everybody that gets the offer. In fact, when you stop at the bottom of that stacking, I do all that stacking all the time. So, when they do something, yeah.
Did you ever get that situation taken care of?
Not
Where
exactly.
they-
But still, they'll figure it out.
Okay,
if we
well,
can start-
welcome officially. And as we move through the morning, if you need to step out and get
Okay,
more
Koa.
food or coffee, feel free to do that.
That's not me. Oh, did you get it? Okay, okay. I have another me up here somewhere. So yeah, come on back, and if you're needing to fill up your cup or get a little bit more food, go ahead. Hey, I want to do just a few minutes of response to what we've explored so far. So start thinking as people are coming back, what are some awareness pieces that have come out for you, or an aha moment in this talk that we've done so far today? You got one? I'm going to have, got one, okay. Yeah, I want to hear just kind of where your thinking is right now with some of the information. So if you guys can kind of quiet down, I'm giving somebody a microphone, giving him all the power. Are you a cleric? No. Okay, good. Okay. Go ahead, introduce yourself by first name and talk about what you started to realize. If we can kind of tone it down a little bit, kind of quiet down.
My name is Eris, and I'm a phlegmatic.
All right. Support group.
What I really appreciate is how you kind of led with kind of the main idea of the small groups. Because when I think of small groups, I think of, we're going to disseminate information, and we're going to teach you this, and you're going to leave with knowledge in your head.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you said empathy and safety that's kind of the critical part of what's happening here. There's things happening other than spreading information. So I appreciated that big perspective.
All right, good. And I saw over here, got one, and we'll go for 3 or 4 more. I want to make sure we get some process going here. Yeah. Huh?
All right, my name's Amanda, and I am a cleric, which is why my hand was up. So I'm actually going to school right now to be a therapist, and empathy's a big buzzword for us. And it was really neat for me to look at the personality styles and see all the things that I've been having to work on, and be able to find a way to apply it to the future and being a leader and wanting to be part of Shadow Mountain. It's just really neat to be able to figure out how I'm going to be able to fit in with like all of y'all and like sitting and talking in groups. So it was cool. Thank you.
Who else? Who else is that? Yeah. Got one here. First name and then.
Hi, my name is Leslie. When we were talking about the personality types, I knew I was a melancholy anyway, but the question I had was, and I hope I already have the answer for this, is to be a successful leader, I must embrace my personality type. I'm hoping that I'm okay. That is perfect. And then the other question, or the other thought I had was regarding empathy. Am I correct in saying that empathy, as necessity, needs to be void of judgment?
Well, first of all, why don't we attack the is it okay to be a perfectionist, a melancholy, and still be a leader? Any thoughts? Does anybody say that's okay with me? I'd be all right having a melancholy leader. By show of hands, who would be okay with a melancholy leader? Okay. The reason we give you guys the personality thing is because there is no right leader. There's absolutely no right leader. We have a grid in our culture of what a leader is, but there is no right leader. In fact, all 4 of those personalities showed up in the Bible all throughout the Bible. There were some, think about Moses. I can't talk good, God, right? Very introverted. He didn't want to get out there and face off with Pharaoh. He was very scared. So I think the personality style just allows you or whoever you are to begin to show up the way God made you. It begins to break down your maybe faulty thought process regarding what a leader is. Because if God's the ultimate leader and he's telling you to lead, there's really no more argument to have. He knows you can do it. And so, yes. The second question I heard was empathy. Should we go to our psychologist person over there? What was the question again? Can you?
Well, empathy, does that mean that it's void of judgment?
Void of judgment. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I hear no and yes. Okay. Yes? How about vote? Void of judgment? Yes? Void of judgment? No. Okay. Okay. So now we're not going to deep dive into that today. I'll give you sort of what the Bible teaches about that. Acceptance is not the same as being okay with what's going on, or permission maybe. So judgment, sometimes we have to get a little bit fine-tuned. In other words, here's the thing. You have somebody in your group you're empathizing with, and they're clearly dealing with something that's not okay in the Bible. Now, what are you going to do about that? Well, that goes to a different training than what we can do here today. But you guys remember what Pastor Jeremiah said about judgment? We're not here to like judge people, but we can be fruit inspectors. Remember me talking about that years ago? Yeah. And so we're not supposed to accept sin into a community. Not at all. That's something we do have to deal with. And if that happens, we have a plan in place for that. But that generally shows up a lot later in community than like starting a community right off the bat. And so what we're doing today is we're saying, hey, how do you get this going? Now, later on, and I'll talk about this toward the end, we do have other sessions and other lessons that you can begin to explore those nuances of how do you handle somebody who's just kind of a jerk, or they're causing real problems and their lifestyle is horrid. How do you handle that? And there are ways to do that. So, yeah.
So wouldn't that fall in the category of what you said here? People need safety, connection, and biblical truth.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's not so much being judgmental as, just emphasizing the biblical truth.
Correct. Yeah. That's a great way to answer it in the short form. Yeah. And that's why we talk about the biblical truth piece. If you've got safety in place, relational connection, biblical truth, like if you're studying the Word of God, they're getting the truth. But there are times when you might get a person who clearly needs more than just, hey, could just maybe not talk so much. There may be more than that going on. And I want to assure you that's something that we have well in hand. And it's actually very rare that it happens because we do have such biblical truth teaching here. So a couple more people, just your response or experience. I got one here. Yeah. Say your name and then.
Mark, I'm none of the above. I'm kidding. I think the bottom line is we have to attack the problem, not the person, okay?
Yeah.
That's it.
Good. That's good. Yeah. Who else? Anybody else? Got one more back here, and then we'll go on with the material. Just say your name, and you can say what you are if you want to.
Oh, hi. Good morning. I'm Sherry Carmona, and I just have to say something. I've been a phlegmatic for a long time. It's an awesome thing to know who you are because it helps you understand other people. I'm naturally introverted, so some people may say, well, she's so stuck up because she don't want to associate. No, I'm just shy by nature. I'm also a teacher and ordained minister, so God knew what he was doing when he called me because I can't do this without his anointing. But one other quick thing. It's so awesome, not only for leadership, but for your family. My husband's a choleric. Opposites attract. Does it get on my last nerve? Oh, Jesus. But it helps me to understand, not take it so personal. And my son's a sanguine. I know what you're talking about. Never slows down. I'm like, and phlegmatics, we just want to just watch the world go by. So yeah, it just helps you understand one another, even with your children and your spouse.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we're starting to maybe wrestle with some new information, or we're seeing old information in a new way, and that's so helpful. What I want to do now is I want to get into a way of leading a group, okay? And this dynamic that we're going to look at today is a way. It's not the way. It's the way that we teach it in the off-campus small groups, but you can easily apply what I'm going to teach in any of the ministries that you may be a part of. And so today is just all about, how does this work? Give me some parts and pieces. I need some handles to work with. And so we're going to give you that here and now. But let me, before we do that, I want to, did you guys get your keys? That's what I was supposed to say. Did anybody lose their keys and find them? Did they come find them? Yeah, we've got some keys over here. We just don't want you to get out to your car and then be like, where's my keys? So make sure you get your keys. All right, so let's do this. This is what it looks like if you're going to lead a group all by yourself, meaning you're not in a part of another ministry. So like in men's ministry, typically they're going to have somebody up front who does a teaching portion. And then after the men's ministry's teaching's done, they'll bring it down to the tables, and the table leaders there will then do the question portion. And what I'm going to give you today is, what if you didn't have somebody up front teaching? And so this is what we'll explore. So generally speaking, small groups happen at night because a lot of people work. And so we talk about buckets, 4 buckets. The buckets are this. There's 4 buckets there. The first bucket is connect time, helping group members connect relationally, helping them matter to each other. And that's just basic conversations. Hey, how was your week? How are things going with your kids? Oh, you're back from vacation. It's good to see you. How was your vacation? It's connecting, just talking, getting to know each other at a deeper and deeper level. That's one piece of a small group night. The second would be the lesson or the sermon questions. Now, if you look, I think you guys have brought them out, right? You have these, the small group leadership packet. If you turn in to page 4 and 5 and 6 on this one, yeah. This is last week's leadership packet. And so if you turn to the 4 and 5 pages, those are some black letters and some red letters, right? This is what we distribute to our small group leaders who host or lead a group in their home. And this is what we're tracking with on the lesson. So you can look at this if you want to as sort of a companion piece. But the lesson, and then that's the sermon questions. And everything we build in small groups that's off campus is based on the sermon series that's going on at that time. The next one is prayer and support. Prayer and support is sharing struggles, difficulties, victories, and praying for each other. That would be your key empathy time, although you may need empathy in all these different times. And then 4th is planning and business, announcements, planning for service projects or socials, logistics, and coordinating. If you have those 4 pieces in a group environment, you've got a small group going on. Very simple, very, very simple. And we work really hard to provide the curriculum, but I think every ministry does. I know women's ministry provides curriculum for their studies, men's does, young married, young adults. And so we're not asking you to develop anything, we're just asking you to sort of facilitate that. But how this works, each week, and here's a fill-in for you, the leader decides how much time, effort, and attention he or she needs to pour into each of the buckets. Time, effort, and attention. So every week it's going to be a little different based on the needs of the group. If somebody comes into the group and they just found out that their husband was in a car crash and their husband's in the hospital, they're probably not going to be there, first of all. But if that were to break out in the group would, their needs would shift radically, right? Because you're probably going to want to go to some prayer time right away. Or if something happens and somebody shows up at the group and they say, hey, something happened in my life today and it was a big deal, you're going to have to shift a little bit. You know, earlier and a little bit in our processing here with the microphone, we talked about what if somebody comes in and they kind of have a different slant on things and their understanding of Scripture is a little off. Well, sometimes you get that and you notice, okay, there's a little tension in the room. That's a great way to just say, hey guys, let's just dive right in the lesson tonight. Let's go to a higher authority than me, the leader. So he takes the pressure off of you, and it allows God to do his job. And it's been amazing. I've had some small group leaders tell me, you know, we had some challenges in the group, some differences of opinion about a certain scripture. We jumped into the lesson, and in the lesson, that was dealt with. It's crazy how that works. That's God at work. That's not us. And so that's a part of being a leader, is allowing God to show up and answer those questions in his own way, in his own time. But so you get the idea. Time, effort, and attention, different things require different approaches and different responses. We deal with that in another class, and like I said, we'll talk about that later. Question, how do you know how much to pour into each of the buckets each week? What the leader puts in each bucket is determined by the needs of the group. The needs of the group. Needs. Such a big deal, needs. I know for a long time, I thought I wanted things. And then I've noticed as life continues to go forward, I notice, if my needs are met, I'm doing okay. Sometimes I get what I want and my life just goes kind of cuckoo. I really want a new car, and then I've got a car payment, and then I've got higher insurance, and then this and that. I'm all worried about where I park. My life gets a little harder. Versus I got this car, it's kind of dinged up a little bit, but no car payment. Somebody opens the door into my car. I don't care. I've got like 50 other dings. It's good. And so sometimes we notice in life needs trump wants. And I think that's what the Bible teaches pretty clear. God will supply all of our needs according to his riches and glory. And if community is where life happens, then community is where needs are going to be met. And that's how a leader determines how to do that. So think response. You just think response. And you're always going to respond out of empathy first. Then you get into some of the different parts and pieces. If a person finds out, another example, a person finds out their spouse left them today or left them this week. And they show up and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. They moved out and I'm having a struggle here. I don't know what's going on. Well, you want to respond with empathy first. You may need to go to some real practical help after that. But first you want to respond with empathy. So let's talk a little bit about how would you lead a discussion using this small group leadership packet. How would you lead a discussion? And again, I'm teaching you kind of how we do it in small groups, but you may be a part of a different ministry, and so apply this to your own experience in the ministry. Sermon-based small group assumptions. The sermon and the small group notes are one product. Small group questions help people grow and mature, not just know more about the Bible. So let's talk a little about that. You'll notice if you're in a small group off campus right now and you meet during the week, you are going to be talking about the sermon you heard on Sunday. That's the plan. That's designed between us and Pastor Jeremiah. But the goal, and is it Aris? Am I pronouncing that right? Aris said it's not just about knowledge. There's more going on, and so that's what this next bullet point's about. Growth and maturity are a little different than just knowledge, because growth and maturity require some experience, some humility, some life-on-life conversations, and that's where the beauty of the Holy Spirit really begins to work. As we gather together, break open His Word, and begin to explore life together, the Holy Spirit does this amazing thing where we help each other grow. And we're not always aware of how or why that works. The machinery is not super clear because it's a spiritual thing. But the growth and mature process requires conversation. The next one, small group questions help people move into conversation. I kind of touched on that. And then we put these little leader tips in here and there. Ask group members to go through them ahead of time so they've had time to think through their responses. Ask group members. Have you ever done a lesson and or you're a part of a class or you're a part of a group or something, and you didn't have a chance to look at your questions that week, and you show up and there's a conversation going on and you're like, oh, I know what I want to say, and you say it. But then 10 or 15 minutes later, you're like, no, I wish I'd said this. You ever had that experience? Maybe you're just out with friends. There's no lesson. You're at dinner, and you're just kind of riffing on life, and you say something, and then later on you're like, I wish I'd said it this way. That's what we're talking about here. Many times our brains need some time around the information before it gets deep enough into our heart that we really know what we're thinking or what we're feeling about those questions. And so we tell and encourage leaders, hey, just have them look through it. There's a couple small groups out there, and one of the groups, they agreed to do this. This wasn't like I didn't tell them to do this, and the leader didn't say, hey, here's what we're going to do. The group came up with this together. They have in their covenant, and I'll show you that in a few minutes, in their covenant, they agree that if you don't have ink on your paper that you've written, you don't get to answer that question. The group agreed to that because they agreed, hey, we need to do some work before we actually show up here if we're going to really get something out of this lesson. And so if there's no handwritten ink on their paper, they don't get to talk. But that's the idea. Have them go through the questions. It's amazing how God shows up the more involved with the information we are. Questions on that? I want to make sure. Yeah.
Why they stop
Because the bulletin's shrinking. That's the whole reason. We are moving slowly. Here's like an insider. Don't pass this around. There will probably be a day when the bulletin goes down to like one sheet because everything's going online. And so you can get the group questions. You can go online and get them. You can download them right off our website now. Yeah, we're not like withholding or hiding. Or you can come to the small group table and get the questions. Yeah, it just took up too much room. It took up like 3 what they call panels in the bulletin, and it's getting thick. And so we decided let's pull that out. Anything else? Any other questions? Good. Well, let's look at the sermon-based lesson structure. So we have, if you'll notice on your small group questions, we have a getting started section, we have a digging deeper section, and then we have a bringing it home section. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. In the getting started section, we know that before people show up to a small group experience, the person most ready to talk about that lesson is who? The leader, right? Because they've been through these great classes and they've learned all kinds of cool stuff to do, all kinds of ways to have a great question and answer time. So the early questions, I'll just read the first one. Number 1 there on getting started, reliance. What is something you rely on every day? An alarm clock, coffee, cell phone, car, hairdryer, whatever. What do you experience when you aren't able to use it? So that's a very generic question. Not a lot of Bible going on there. Not a lot of theology we have to worry about. It's just getting people into the room. And we're just asking a very generic question. That's, hey, let's just get around the information, get comfortable with it. Secondly, digging deeper. So now we go down to the digging deeper section there. Points to what the Bible says about the topic through the sermon or through additional Bible passages. Talks about how that biblical truth applies to the real world. And it talks about our life. It's talking about our lives and preparing us for growth. So the digging deeper section on the sheet, on the paper here, the first one's pretty long. It was a listing that I did. And then the second one is read Matthew 16, 24 and 26. What does it mean to take up our cross and to deny ourselves? Describe someone who models self-control this way. So you can see we're pulling out of the scripture a theme or an element that we're encouraging people to begin to deal with. And it was on self-control and discipline, the sermon was, and so we were able to explore that really well. And then lastly, bringing it home. It asks the question, how can I live differently? It's the point of the entire lesson, and we put in here, it takes courage to lead through this point. So let's just read the bringing it home number 1 on page 5 of the leadership packet. Read 1 Timothy 4, 7 through 8. How would growing in self-control actually free you to live a better, higher quality life? Here is a recipe for growing in self-control, and then we give 4 steps of how you could grow in self-control. And so you can see it becomes a very practical next step about how can you live differently. That's the goal of really any Bible study, is to get into the Word and then begin to move out of the Word with a sense of, now how do I live in response to what the Bible says? And so this is just something that we give to our leaders that they can have as a structure and as kind of a script if they need it. The red portion is only for leaders. That's what the leaders get special. They have to actually log in and get that. They have to have a password and all that kind of fun stuff because we're like the Pentagon small groups. And but this gives the leader some fresh material to pull from. So let's say let's go up to number 5, page 5, number 5, and there's a question. Read 1 Peter 1:13. How much does our thinking influence our actions? What would it take to adjust the way you think in order to install self-discipline into your life? Who could you talk to about this in order to get the much-needed encouragement to adjust and keep it up? And then there was a C.S. Lewis quote that I found. It was actually, it was in the sermon and I kept it. Christians often unfairly blame their sins on their body and its appetites. But in most cases, the body is merely obeying impulses generated in the mind. And so we just, again, we give the leader something that the group doesn't have. And a lot of times you'll notice, you might ask a question and the group just kind of goes flat. Well, then this allows the leader to say, well, here's something else you can think about. Here's another way of looking at that question. Now, how might you respond? So that's the way that a lesson works. But if you're in a different ministry, you may notice that, well, we're using a book, or we're using a study of some kind. The hope is, and the plan is, that the questions are going to do something similar to this, that you're going to kind of get around each other and get comfortable with each other for that event, experience. But eventually there's going to be a point where you're going to apply. You're going to say, here's what I'm going to do different this week, or here's a conversation I need to have, or here's a change I need to make in my life. And they may not be big and drastic. They may be small. But that's an example or a picture of what it would look like if you were to lead a group. And you may have experienced this from a participant side, or you may have experienced it from a leader side. So questions on those different parts and pieces? Yeah? Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what we do in small groups is we provide this. This is a curriculum we provide. And then if a leader decides, hey, that's not necessarily where we're at in phase of life. So for instance, if you have 4 or 5 couples in the group and they all have newborns, but we're studying, say, Job, there may be a little bit of a disconnect between their ability to apply what's being studied with their life. And so a lot of times leaders will come and they'll say, hey, we'd like to do a different study. Here's a study we're going to do. And we just do a little bit of a vetting process with the material. But we're very much open to that, yeah. We generally, when a new leader starts leading a group off campus, we say, use this first. Get comfortable leading your group. Give your group the dignity of them being really familiar with the preaching here, the content, and then as you get to know each other and you learn needs, remember needs is the big key, as you learn needs, you may say, we need to deviate a little bit. And some of our groups, they'll do the small group questions for a while that we provide, and then they'll kind of, we're kind of getting a little flat on that. Let's go and study something else for a while. And then they'll come back from time to time and do the small group questions. The big reason we provide this, the big reason is so you don't feel like you have to. We never want you to feel like you have to generate your own material because you're busy. We're all busy. And we don't want you to do that. Again, a part of our job is to make sure your job isn't hard and isn't laborious and draining. So now I want to pull out, on the left side of your folder, if you'll turn in your folder, there's a thing called the Small Group Covenants, first sheet. The first sheet. This is another piece of the pie that we think is pretty important because it's amazing what a covenant does. How many people here have ever gotten a car loan? Anybody ever gotten a car loan? How about a home loan? Yeah? Has anybody ever paid for anything with their credit card? Okay? Hopefully I've hit most, if not all of you. What do you do at the end of reading through the contract or you get done with the sale? You sign. We are a country that our signature still means something. And because we've grown up in that experience, we use a covenant. But it predates our country. The covenant, you guys remember the Abraham covenant way back in the Bible, right? The covenant began with Abraham. It was foretold even back as far as Adam and Eve, but there was this, they call it the Abrahamic covenant. But God made a covenant with Abraham and said, your kids will be as numerous as the sand on the seashore, right? And God began a people with Abraham. So covenant's been around a long time. The form of the covenant changes, but the function is still the same. It's the idea that we're all in on this thing. And so we believe strongly in covenants. Why? One big reason is it really stops problems before they begin. There's something about agreeing to do something and then signing our names. It adjusts the way we show up in a group. So let's go through the fill-ins first. So set the covenant aside for just a second, but let's go through the fill-ins on page 2 of the content here. The small group covenant. Groups that go well do so because they've made a commitment to each other. Groups that go well do so because they've made a commitment to each other. It's the way relationships work. That's why we have a big wedding ceremony. And we do rings and There's all kinds of different things we do in that type of a ceremony. But in almost every event or every project or every agreement that people make with each other, there's a point where you sit down together and you say, and here are the rules, here's the agreement, here's what we're going to do. That's the first thing. But a covenant, moving on the content there, a covenant clarifies expectations by telling people two things. First, here's what to expect in our group. Here's what to expect in our group. And secondly, here's how to succeed in our group. Here's how to succeed. If you get a car loan and you sign on the dotted line and they give you some kind of a pay calendar or pay schedule, they're telling you, hey, here's what we expect. Every month, you're going to write a check or you're going to pay online or whatever, and you're going to give us so much money per month. And in exchange for that, you get to drive your car around. And here's how you know you succeed. We don't come after you with either mail that says final notice, if you don't pay your bill, we're going to come repo your car, or there's a point where the loan dies because you fulfilled it. Now the car is yours outright. And that's all we're doing in a small group. We're just saying, hey, here's how it works. Moving on, how does the covenant work? Now this is a little bit more in terms of how would you use it or apply it. First, there'd be a covenant night, and then we do that the first night, the beginning of every ministry season or after, say, a holiday. When you start back up in January, so small groups start in September, so we say do one in September, definitely. Sit down with your group, walk through the covenant. But hey, if you get a break, and a lot of people take December off because December is so busy, come back in January and just review the covenant. Because here's what we found. People have a covenant signed, and then their needs change, and the expectations of the group change. Like, hey, we're doing it this way, let's try it this way. And so we say, do that again. Covenant renewal is that idea of what I just said, kind of, okay, we're back together again. Now, let's look at the covenant for a minute, the actual physical covenant here. We just supply 5 pieces to the covenant. The first one there is we agree to come to group. I don't know if you've ever done anything in the way of church stuff, but it's amazing how sometimes people think, well, I signed up for that thing. That means I'm in that thing, even if I don't go to that thing. Have you guys ever experienced? I mean, maybe you've done it. I don't know. The easy kind of finger point is, well, I signed up for the fitness club. I have the fitness club little card on my keychain. That means I'm a member at that fitness club, and I've been there twice in 3 years. So what we do here is we say, no, we actually agree to show up, physically show up. And then we give some different reasons. We will meet on a certain night until a certain date. Our start and end time each week are a certain time start and a certain time end. And then if we're going to be late or if we cannot make it to small group, we agree to. So the idea is you're just saying, hey guys, we want you here, and here's what here looks like. And so I was talking to somebody before we started today, and sometimes people are afraid, well, if we have it at night, I kind of don't want people staying at my house late. Then put that in the covenant. Hey, at 9 o'clock, we're standing up and walking out the door. If you want to do more, you can stand outside our house. We're going to bed. We love you. Good night. And so you can actually put that in the covenant, and we have some leaders who do that. They actually say, I got to get up at 4 a.m., this thing's over at 8:30, you're gone by 8:35, I'm in bed at 9. So just talk quiet if you're going to be out in my driveway. And that's what we do. But it also tells people, you still need to be here. If you're not here, it doesn't count. You're not a part of what we're doing. We need you here. And so that's one piece. The second piece is we agree to come to small group prepared. Coming prepared looks like, and we touched on that with the idea of ink on the page. But again, this is the group brainstorming together, weighing in on this, saying, what does it look like? We want to be in agreement about this, but what does it look like? Third, we agree to create safety and honor confidentiality. And we spend a lot of bullet points on this one because the number one thing in small groups that's required is safety. The number one destroyer of safety is if people hear from a third party that they've been talked about. That was God. He said, that's important. Pay attention. Yeah. So, and you guys may have had that happen to you where you said something and you thought it was in confidence, and then you found that it wasn't. That is so hurtful. And that will destroy safety immediately. And then you have to go through this long process of building safety again. So we spend a lot of time there. Number 4, we agreed to play and serve. We believe in the small group ministry that what we have in a community needs to be shared at some level. And so whether it's fixing meals for people in need, or some of our groups go to the Ronald McDonald House and prepare meals for the kids and the parents that are there for various reasons. But the idea is go and do something not in the small group setting once or twice a season. Go to the beach, go watch a movie, go help people, go clean something up. But take this into the world. Take this brighter light that's being built in this community of Jesus Christ and go share it with the world. And then last, because we got to eat, small group snacks, right? And so we talk about that. Little leader tip, I didn't put it in here, but a leader tip, if you're the person who's hosting and or leading the group, unless you just love baking and you have all kinds of time, don't be the person that supplies snacks. I mean, if you want to, do it, but don't feel like you have to. When I've led small groups, when I lead small groups, I don't ever provide snacks personally. I'm busy, and I'm the guy leading the whole thing, and I'm like, guys, you can run to Vaughn's and pick up something. Pick up some crackers or, whatever the group agrees to. I just want you to hear from me, you don't have to also carry that part of the load. You could even turn that portion over to somebody else in your group if you wanted to. Hey, could you handle snacks, kind of distribute the need and let people know what that need is. So, and on the back, you'll see that there's all these signature lines. And that's what we want to make sure you guys have. And then you just hold on to this. You just keep it. And this is amazing. We've had people who are chronic late people start a small group or start going to a small group. They sign this covenant and they're never late to small group. Or if they're going to be, they communicate, hey, I'm going to be late. So sorry. It's just because we've asked them to kind of live at a little bit of a higher level. And most people want to, and they will. They'll show up at a higher level. So, questions on the covenant? Any questions on that? Not even the cleric table back there? No questions? No challenges? No pushback? They'll fix it later. All right. I love it. So let's turn to page 3 then, back in the content piece. As we think about starting a group, the key here is new members in the covenant. So let's say somebody comes to your group kind of later. They're not a part of your group initially when you first do sign-ups, but you've kept your group open, meaning you're still taking in people to be a part of your group. And all you would do is say, hey, you're welcome here, and you do the small group night, and then afterwards you say, hey, just so you know, we're a covenant group. And then the next fill-in there, ask them to come to 4 weeks straight. Ask them to come to 4 weeks straight. And the idea there is they're getting to try your group on. You're giving them a fair shake, because not all groups fit every person that goes to that group. We never want you guys to feel like you have to be sort of a one-size-fits-all leader, nor do you need to be a group like that. So, and we encourage people who come to our table and go online, hey, visit 3 or 4 groups. Check them out. Find one that fits good. All the groups at our church are going to study God's Word, but it may not be the right fit for you. We want you to feel comfortable. We want you to feel safe. So there's that. Final thoughts on the covenant. And I talked about this one. It deals with a huge percentage of potential conflict up front. It honors the law of buy-in. Everyone decides together. It puts expectations out in the community, and it helps people learn how to do relationships. Number 4 there, praying in the group. Praying in the group. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because the question itself is can be a little bit vulnerable. Some of you may not be comfortable praying in front of people. That's okay. And people that come to your group may not feel comfortable praying in front of people. That's okay too. But we need prayer in our groups. It's very much a part of how the Christian life works. And so we just want you to hear, first of all, if you're struggling with that, that's probably a growth piece for you to be able to start praying in front of a group. But don't ever demand it from those in your group, and invite them in to do that. But the first piece here is, if you're praying, avoid stained glass language. Stained glass language. Does anybody here know what that is? What's that? Thou art, yeah. If thou does not speakest in thisest way, do notis prayest in thisest way. Yeah, yeah. So just don't feel like you have to become somebody you're not because you're praying, right? Pray the way you would pray if nobody was there. I mean, depending on how intense that prayer gets. Pray appropriately for that. Do we have a question back there? I see oh, you're just stretching, and are you testifying? Testify. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Christianese. Yeah. Yeah. Christianetic, yeah, that's a new one. Yeah. So the piece I want to make sure you guys hear in this is model. Don't instruct. Model it. You may have somebody in your group that likes to pray, and they do the thous and the these, or they throw in the Christianese. But as the leader, model a very accessible prayer. That's all. Some people, and I have friends who do it, they are actually very into sort of the King James Version of praying. But they're authentically into it. They're not posing. That's how they pray all the time. I don't get it. It doesn't work for me. But it works for them. They love it. And so it's like, okay, that's them. I'm just saying be authentic in who you are. And if you do pray in a little bit of a Christianese, you can even give a little bit of a, right before you pray, hey guys, just so you know, that's what I do. It's nothing weird. It's just me. And you don't have to pray this way, but this is what I do. Yeah, there's one of my friends, he likes to say Father. And like, it seems like he says it every sentence in the prayer. And that's kind of a Christianese thing, maybe, and kind of, oh, Father, we're so thankful, Father, that you love us so much, Father. But he's not being like weird or goofy about it. He generally loves his Father, and that's the way he tells his Father that he's in love with him. Yeah.
In the women's small groups, often there's not prayer time for everybody's prayer requests.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, an idea of whole line is to repeat the key points of your lesson.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What I got, and I did this, and I felt good, but rather, God, thank you for your son.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one idea.
That's a great idea.
Focus on the content of the lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Honestly, that's what our focus is. It's not on myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I can learn about God to do life better.
Yeah. No, that's good. And also, just so you know, there's a little prayer ideas box here. That breaks out even in more details. How could you do prayer in a small group? I see a question, but then we'll move on. Yeah.
I belonged to Joyce Kessler's small group for a number of years.
Yeah.
She had a rule that we could only make prayer requests regarding ourselves, and that way we weren't requesting prayer for my son-in-law's sister's child's cousin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it kept the group closer in connection with each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah, and that brings up a point that we deal with in another lesson, and that is this. There are times to pray externally, sort of out there for the world and whatnot. But community, small groups, is actually designed for you. It's designed for the group. So that then you take that into the world. But yeah, it's appropriate. But I agree with that, and we teach that, hey, let's keep it sort of here. Let's keep the prayers either what happened in the lesson or about the people here tonight, as opposed to people that are external. Because a lot of times we get into this thing where we are constantly worried about everybody else, and we never actually are given care and comfort and love. We don't receive. And a part of the Christian life is giving and receiving, and community is about receiving and giving. So, but let's do this. Let's go to number 5. Prepare your group for life after you. Set your group up to succeed beyond you. Fill in there. Set your group to succeed beyond you. We are a busy, kind of ever-changing, ever-moving, all kinds of things are happening in life in San Diego County. And every season, we find that there's some leaders that have to leave for whatever reason. And some leaders die. Like some leaders just, it's their time. But the goal of community is that one person doesn't decide the fate or the success of any one group. And so we're always encouraging you, hey, find somebody who can help you do what you do. And let's go on through here. Start working on identifying an apprentice immediately. We call them apprentices in small groups. Some people call them co-leaders. But the next steps would be something like to ask them to help you with something. Continue to ask them for help. Increase the size of the ask and the responsibility. Here's the leader tip. Don't ask them, hey, will you be my apprentice? If somebody came up to me and I was in a small group and I didn't want to be a leader, it's a scary word, and they said, hey, will you be my apprentice? I'd be like, nope, because I don't want to do what you do. But you can kind of sneak them in, and you start to give them, and we have a top 10 sheet that we give out to our leaders. Give them these 10 jobs, and if they've done all 10 jobs and they're doing it well, they're you. Now it's a matter of, do you want to have that conversation with them? Leading groups is not rocket science. It just takes a willing heart, and that's about it. I mean, you need some skill, but we handle the skill part. If you've got the willing heart, we'll handle that. And then check with staff for further strategies. So, yes, sir.
So basically then, if you have an apprentice, you can switch off.
Yeah. Say,
hey, can you take this over?
Yep.
And explain it to the group, hey, so-and-so is going to be doing today's session, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we have a few different ways that shows up.
The group needs to know that in advance.
Yeah. No, I mean, you need to have the private conversation with somebody who may step into your shoes. But we have some groups that they actually have multiple leaders because the leader has developed those other leaders. And so no one leader has to lead the whole season because it can get a little tiring if you lead every single discussion we have a 9-month season of small groups, and that's once a week for 8 months because you take off December, but that's tiring. And so they actually switch around. Once a month, a different leader leads. Some leaders travel for a living. They're in the sales world, and they have to go to their territories and whatnot, and they're not always home. And so they actually have somebody else who covers while they're gone. Some leaders are like, I want to start this group, but I want to start another group next season, and another group next season, and so their whole thing is in one season they develop a couple leaders in their group, and then they go start a new group the next September. So you can do a lot with this based on your personality, back to the personality profile, and also based on kind of where God's leading you. Some of you may be that sort of, I want to stay in this group, but I want to birth leaders into other places in the county and help them. But some of you may be like, no, I want to be the guy or the girl, the couple that goes out and starts a new group and leave this group here, kind of like Paul. That was the Apostle Paul. He'd start a church and take off and go do something else. Then next, let's go to number 6 here. Keep yourself filled up as a leader. Keep yourself filled up as a leader. And that goes to 2 different pieces that are in your packet. One was on the outside of your folder. It looks like this. It says, text learn to lead to 555-888. That's a little sheet. And then there's another one that was inside your folder that says leadership essentials. And then there's some dates on there. If you want to stay around the leadership development track and just, hey, I want to go know what next steps are, text today, take your phone, text to 555-888, learn, and the number 2, and then lead. And then periodically, you'll get invitations from us to come to some of our events that are training event oriented or ongoing leadership oriented, depending on where you're at. So if you want to be a part of that, absolutely do that. You can opt out at any time. It's just like Redbox. Hit stop to reply or whatever. But different text techniques allow you to get out if you decide, this isn't the best for me. But if you want to get around this and get into it, absolutely text today. And then the second thing is, if you want to go a little deeper into the training, we're giving you a lot of nuts and bolts today, but we also have 3 other leadership trainings. On July 21st, it's Community 101. On July 28th, it's Leadership Basics. And on August 4th, it's Leadership Tools. And if you turn around to the back of the card, you'll see a little bit of a breakdown of what those different classes are about. Today, we're giving you all those nuts and bolts. If you were to go lead a group tonight, how would you do it? And you get that. This gives you some of those higher orbit questions. Like, if you did have a challenge in the group, what would you do? Or kind of give me a philosophy of leadership that I can kind of keep in my brain. How would this work? And so we talk a lot about that in these. And then so keep that. If you want to be a part of that, you will be invited. You'll hear from us. And then just so you guys know, we have 4 events a year for leaders. So let's say you decided today, I definitely want to be a leader. And you start leading with us in small groups off campus or with one of the other ministries. We get you involved in that. And then we have 4 events a year that we invite, and it's strictly for small group and or small group ministry type leaders, cafes, tables, that kind of thing. And that's in August. There's one. We do that at the kickoff. There's one in November. That's a refilling, meaning we give you guys a lot of great content for leaders. Then you have one in February, and then we have a big fun celebration in May that we put together and just celebrate you guys as leaders. So we are fiercely committed to making sure you as leaders have all the resources you need ongoing to lead your groups well, to kind of stay fresh, and to keep moving. So we'd love for you to be a part of that with us as well. But let's quickly jump to conclusion, and then we're going to be, I think, just about done. So you want to be a leader. If you're not currently leading, here's sort of the track. 1, become a Shadow Mountain Church member. We do ask if people are going to lead with us in ministry that they also become a member, meaning they're committed to us. They're committed to this church and being a part of what we're about. Complete the small group leadership training, which I just talked about, which is going to start on July 21st. Come to small group events, which we just talked about. And then lastly, complete the leader registration form. So if you're like, I definitely want to do small groups, the off-campus small groups, if you look in the folder, the very last sheet on the left side of your folder, the very last sheet on the left side of the folder is a small group registration form. You are welcome to fill that out today, leave it here at the table, and then we'll get you guys in the process. But you may be saying, no, I want to do something else. I want to come to another class and kind of learn more about leadership, or I want to be a part of one of the other ministries. I'm already a part of one of the other ministries. This card that was on top of your folder, Leadership Essentials, fill that out and just check the appropriate box. If you came because you're a part of the women's ministry already, go ahead and check this box. That way we don't reach out to you assuming that we just didn't get one. This will just tell us kind of where you're at as a person. If you want to get involved in Young Marrieds or you're already a part of Young Marrieds, great, let us know. Or if you're a part of another ministry that's not on this, there's an other checkbox, let us know, and I'll just make sure that these get to the appropriate ministry leader and they know, hey, they've gone through this leadership training with us, and that'll be really good. And then last thing we gave you here, this is just kind of for your own kind of fun, conversation tips and tricks. This is for you as you start to think through, how would I lead a group, and how would I ask those questions, and how would I kind of help the conversation move forward? We just gave you 2 different ideas and a tip. One is make it your own, meaning ask the questions the way you would. If you are working off of a scripted question sheet, a study or something, change those words around to reflect your personality. Sometimes you read a question and it sounds like you're reading a question. And people don't respond to those questions as well as if you just say, hey, tell me about, in your own voice, in your own words. And so that would be one thing. Second thing would be make it about them. Meaning, if you can, let other people in your group answer the question before you do. Always defer out from you. If they need you to answer the question first to help you kind of keep the conversation flowing, that's one thing. But sometimes we can, in our leadership enthusiasm, we can get really excited and then we can kind of dominate the question time and the other people don't get a chance to talk. And so I encourage leaders, unless they just aren't talkative and they're just not into that question, answer last or answer somewhere down the line a little bit. And then last, the leader tip there, allow gaps in the conversation. Don't fill silence with words if you don't have to. Many times people, and especially the more introverted types, the ones that process internally, they're thinking through something. Something's happening, and they're quiet for a reason. And give them that space to wrestle through whatever that answer is that they're trying to develop. The last thing I want to draw attention to today, and then we're going to be done, is we're partnering with Heidi and the Children's Ministry, and this was on top of your folder as well. It says Summer Blast 2019, and they're still needing volunteers. This was as of yesterday, and she's asking if you can volunteer, please volunteer, but she went a step further. On the back is what they need. And so you could fill this out and actually check box, or it's more of a circle, but you could check this and say, hey, I'm willing to help out with this. And we want you guys to know that there is an immediate leadership need. It's coming up in just a few weeks. And you guys heard the stats. We're pushing for close to 1,500 kids, and we're not quite at 200 volunteers yet. And we want to make sure those kids have a safe environment, and we need bodies to make sure that environment's safe. The work is not hard. I've volunteered for years. It's not hard work. You're not having to teach a bunch of curriculum if you don't want to. You can be the person that's pouring, drinks into a cup, and then that's it. That's all you do. So you can kind of determine that. But if you have availability, even if you have partial week availability, please fill this out, leave it at your tables, and I know Heidi and their team would appreciate that as well. Well, our time is done. We thank you so much for coming today. Thank you for facing your fears if you needed to. I want to pray for us before we close out today. And I pray that today you now have clarity on your next steps of leadership here at Shadow Mountain. So why don't we stand and I'll pray and we will be dismissed. Dear God, we thank you that what we've looked at today, what we've considered today, it's just us responding to you. We responded to you when we first either went to church, went to a small group, met people who were Christian. We responded to you and we decided, yes, I will follow you, Jesus, as my Lord and Savior. And now, God, it's just another response. We're just responding at a new level. We're responding to you to say, God, if you would have me, I will do this. So I pray for clarity on that. I pray for an inspiration internally, even amidst fear or doubt, that you would show each person in this room what your next step is for them, and specifically what your next step of leadership is. God, thank you that you never leave us alone. You model community, you are with us, and you invite us into a complete experience of life in community. May we, this group here today, be a part of the tomorrow of leadership for Shadow Mountain. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks again for coming, everybody.
Stay blessed, my friend.